Folks, I'm sure we'll have a few more folks joining the webinar as we get started here. I have a few intro slides for you, but just want to thank you all for taking time out of your day and joining us for a great topic today. I have John Deal from Hartford Funds, and he's going to share a great presentation with us today that is actually not called Retain Your Brain or Retrain Your Brain. It's actually called Retain Your Brain. John was gracious enough to say we'll do a little bit of both of those things today. But before we get started, I always like to start off and just do a few intro slides just to let you maybe understand a little bit about who Cornerstone is, because there's a very good chance that you may not know, just given how your financial advisor has structured their business. So to start off with, Cornerstone is based in St. Louis, Missouri. We have, and you'll see some of the numbers on the screen, I'll update those for you as we go through. We have about 125 financial advisors in 15 states. We were founded in 2005. We actually have a little bit over $8 billion in total client assets that our advisors manage. And those advisors have joined us from 17 different firms. Our business model is really set up to really help advisors who maybe establish their business elsewhere, but really saw an opportunity to provide a better client experience, maybe just really structure things in a way that was focused on their clients. And in order to do that, they wanted to go independent. And when they go independent, there's a lot of things that they have to do on their own. And we really help them get started and then continually run their practice as an independent financial advisor. Now, I mentioned that you may not know who Cornerstone is, and that's because your advisor has chosen to brand as something other than Cornerstone, which is something we fully support. But you see a number of the names on the screen here, and these are some of the DBAs that our advisors use. NMLT down in Oklahoma. You'll see Steamboat out in Washington, Missouri. You'll also see LifeMap up in the Springfield and Decatur area. A lot of great brands that are out there, but again, all of those advisors are still affiliated with Cornerstone. And you also might be familiar with LPL because, of course, you get your statements from LPL. You, at the same time, your assets are custodied with LPL. Some background on who they are. They have over 22,000 financial advisors across the country. They are the largest independent broker-dealer in the United States. And probably one of the most important stats that you see on the screen there is they have 0 proprietary products. So the advisors who are with LPL really are not incented. They're not told to sell any product other than what's really most appropriate for their clients. So that is something that I think is very attractive for advisors who decide to go down that independent path. Now, how does all this come together for you? Well, you obviously are working with your financial advisor who has chosen that independent model is best for you and their business. All the assets are custodied with LPL, but LPL also provides, let's call it the inventory or the products that they can offer you to meet your financial needs. What Cornerstone does is really provide some additional layers of support, structure, and scale that they can plug into that maybe take some of the work of running the business off of their plate. This webinar would be a good example of that. We do the planning, we do the compliance approvals, we get the invitation to a point where all they need to do is email that out to you, and then we'll help them put it on. So it just provides leverage to their business. Now, throughout this presentation today, if you do come up with questions, in order to ask that question, you do have to do it through email. This, again, is one of those compliance layers or compliance hurdles that we have to adhere to for LPL. So if you do have a question, the way you ask is you send an email to cornerstonewm@lpl.com. All one word, no spaces in that first part of it, no dots in the first part of it, cornerstonewm@lpl.com. John, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if you'd like to share yours as I give your introduction, that'd be great. Sure. As I mentioned before, John Deal is with us today from Hartford Funds. John's is a senior vice president of Applied Insights. He's been with Hartford for more than 30 years, which, John, that's very impressive in our industry to be with one firm for that long. So congratulations to you on that. But what John does is he leads the firm's efforts in working with the MIT Age Lab. And some of the information, actually a lot of the information that he's going to be sharing with you today comes from that. But then they take that information and really turn it into actionable ideas that financial advisors can then use with their clients to, again, provide a better client experience and educate them longer term. You can sometimes find John's views on retirement planning and other financial issues in the Wall Street Journal, Financial Planning Magazine. He's also been a featured guest on CNBC and Bloomberg Television. So we're really, really honored to have you today, John. And I've seen this presentation once before. And even though we misnamed it, I know the content is awesome. So let me stop talking and turn things over to you.
Well, Bill, thank you very much. And thanks for the kind introduction. And a thanks to all of your advisors and especially all of you clients who are taking some time out of your day to hear a little bit about retaining your brain. So Bill, thanks again for the intro. To give you a little bit of an idea of who I am, what I do, and why I'm kind of leading our call today, is that, as Bill mentioned, for over 30 years now, I've been in the financial services industry, all with one company, but the last 20 to 25 years of my career have been spent leading our research in aging and longevity. And we do that in large part with our partners at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Age Lab. Many on the call today may not realize MIT has an entire division of their engineering program studying aging, longevity, the impact of technology, changing lifestyle, which will help companies in the United States and around the world think about new products, new services, maybe even in new environments that we may find ourselves in moving forward. And I will share with you that in the course of that research, one of the things that we know is that when we look at what concerns people most about retirement, this is MIT research, they tell us that up until age 65, it's all about the money, the money, the money, the money. How much will I need? When can I leave? How much can I take? How long will it last? You know all the questions. However, at some point, and MIT tells us it's from age 66 to 74, our priorities oftentimes begin to change, and health begins to supplant money in terms of our number one concern. What good is all the money if we don't have the health to be able to enjoy the life that we had envisioned? But more specifically, over age 75, we now know that it's not only health, but more specifically cognitive decline that concerns most Americans about aging or about that retirement phase. Money comes in number 3 at that point. So therefore, it only made sense that we began to dig deeper into the subject of cognitive health, because so many of our clients were coming to us asking, what's the new research, what's being done here? And so this presentation is really about the title, Retaining Your Brain. And I joked with Bill that retraining is okay too. Maybe I'll demonstrate a few ways in which we can retrain our brains as we go through our presentation today. But the whole idea is that there is new hopeful research that has just emerged in the last 5 to 10 years that shows that, obviously, in addition to picking the right parents in terms of having the right genetics, that science is now understanding that lifestyle factors may have as much to do with cognitive health as those genetic factors that I've talked about. So today's presentation, I'm going to fast forward here, comes to us not from MIT, but from another subject matter expert that we work with. Dr. Mark Milstein is a PhD in biological chemistry from the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. Dr. Milstein is a brain researcher. He's also an author. He recently authored a book called The Age-Proof Brain. And I'll mention it again at the end of the presentation. But if you're really interested in this topic, much of my presentation specific to cognitive health comes from Dr. Milstein's book, The Age-Proof Brain. And it's a great resource if you're interested in the topic area. But Dr. Milstein's premise is, as I described a moment ago, we now have strong evidence that simple lifestyle interventions can dramatically improve brain health and lower the risk of disease today, tomorrow, and into the future. So in today's session, we're going to discuss a couple of things. We're going to discuss the fact that your age and your brain's age in terms of functionality may actually be two different things. We'll talk about the importance of brain health. And, as Bill was kind of giving my introduction, I'll share with you that I have a number of designations and a number of letters after my name. However, two of them are not MD. So I will do as best I can to describe some of the physiological factors that happen in our brains that lead to what scientists now believe are longer term incidences of cognitive health. And we'll talk about some of the cost implications of dementia and cognitive health. And then lastly, really the meat of my presentation is I'm going to share with you 5 lifestyle areas where science is now saying if we pay attention in these areas, there's no silver bullet, but the way these things all work together, the research is now telling us can have dramatic impact on either avoiding or delaying the onset of dementias and other cognitive symptoms. So let's talk about your age versus your brain's age. Now, some of you may be saying, what? My brain has been around as long as I have. Well, we're not talking about it in a physical sense. What we're talking about functionally is your brain older, younger, or about the right age for where you're at. And you see, we understand that there are differences in terms of cognitive functions because of a group of people around the world called superagers. If you've never heard of a superager, maybe you've heard of something called a blue zone. Blue zones are geographic areas around the world where people who live in a geographic area known as a blue zone, they're in Sardinia, they're in Greece, there's one in Chile. I think closest one to all of us would be Loma Linda, California, where people who live in those geographic areas tend to display extended longevity versus the populations that live around them. They live longer. Well, in that case, and by the way, there's a Netflix special on the blue zones. I think it's called Blue Zone Secrets of Living to 100, if you're interested in that. But the key is, if we can isolate a group of people who live in these blue zones, who are living longer than everyone around them, but again, realize they're living in close proximity, so their genetic makeup is probably similar, well, then the question has to come, what is it that they are doing that the populations around them are not? And are those the keys to longer life? Well, in a similar way, let me describe who superagers are. Superagers who are people usually above age 80 who display the cognitive function, the ability to recall things from memory, the ability to concentrate and focus, of people who are 20, 30, or more years younger than them. In fact, we know that the human brain begins to lose mass beginning at age 40 at a rate at about 5% of brain mass per decade. What's interesting about these superagers is that upon autopsy, their brains appear plump and as full as people who are much younger than they are. So it's both physical, but the physical allows for cognitive function. And by the way, let me point out, you may be saying, John, yes, they may have won the genetic lottery, but what we also find is that some of these superagers carry the same genetic markers that are indicative of development of cognitive disease as other people. So they carry the same genetic markers, except this group of people called superagers tend to exhibit longer periods of cognitive health. And as researchers, we need to ask why, or what is it that they're doing. So if we have to start somewhere and we want to get a sense of our brain's functional age, I have a couple of questions for you from Dr. Milstein. Now, before you panic, I just want to point out the answers to these questions you do not have to share with anyone. These are questions that we all should be reflecting on ourselves in order to understand, is there a deeper issue that I should talk to a medical professional about? I got to tell you that several years ago, I would not have touched this topic. Personal aside here, at age 25, I was named guardian of my grandmother who was suffering and diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Well, 25 years old, I had no idea where to turn, what to do. And so I tell people, I got a lifetime of experience in about the 4 years that she was with us. However, what I will point out is that a lot of times in the past, when someone received a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's, it was kind of like, well, game's over, not much we can do. What research is now showing is that early detection is key. In fact, many of the pharmaceuticals that are coming through the pipeline that have promise, not in curing the disease, but at least in slowing symptoms, need to be administered in the earlier phases. And if we can detect that there's a change in our cognitive health, we can go to a physician who can begin to assess what the cause is of it and things that we may do, again, to preempt the progression of the disease. So a couple of questions to get us started. The first is, how well can I manage my day? Now, I'm not talking about you forgot your car keys somewhere. We all do that sometimes. Talking about you get somewhere and you can't remember your address or how you got there or how you get home. You're missing on a repeated basis frequent appointments in your calendar, important appointments. How well can I manage my day? Am I losing a grip on the things that are important? Here's an interesting question. How well can I remember important information? So I'd quiz you all. How many of you listening today could tell me the childhood phone number in the house that you grew up in? Now, if we were live, I think I'd see a lot of hands go up, and then I'd ask my second question. How many of you had to dial a child or a grandchild right now could tell me what their cell phone number is? You see, what's happened is ever since the introduction of this device, we've been told to take everything that's up here and store it on there. Dr. Milstein would remind us that memory is like a muscle. It needs to be exercised. It's not a bad idea to flip over the grocery list from time to time. Try to recall what was on it. That to-do list of things you'd written out in the morning, flip it over sometimes and try to recall the priority items that were on your to-do list. How well can I remember important information is another indicator. How well can I move and maintain balance? This is one that we don't give a lot of thought to, but think about the concept of balance. In order to be balanced, our brain has to work with all the muscles and nerves in our body to sense the environment, the surface that we're standing on, so on and so forth, to allow us to maintain equilibrium. If you want to think about this a different way, if you ever had the opportunity to visit someone who had recently suffered a stroke, many times sense of balance is one of the things that's impacted the most, to the extent that they may not even be able to sit up in bed and maintain balance. Balance is intricately tied to cognitive function. This is one that trips everybody up, no pun intended. How fast can you walk? When we talk about how fast can you walk, I'm not going to say if you don't walk at 4 miles an hour at a 5% incline, you're doomed. No, but here's what I will point out. If there were one thing I could tell you that you could participate in, that scientists now believe that could reduce the risk of developing dementia and cognitive issues somewhere in the range of 30 to 40%, what would it be? Well, you probably guessed from the question, it's walking at least 30 minutes a day. By the way, the 30 minutes do not have to be contiguous, but when you walk those 30 minutes or 30 minutes plus, try to accelerate the pace for 6 to 9 minutes. Research is showing that people who tend to walk with an accelerated gait tend to display longer periods of cognitive health. Why may this be? Well, obviously, your heart and circulatory system are an important part of brain health, because every breath you take, in every breath that you take, 20% of the oxygen that you bring in is used by your brain. So making sure that our brain has adequate oxygen supply is really, really key. So walking, being physically active, really important. But again, if you can remind yourself to just try to pick up the pace a little bit, has been shown to have better effects on cognitive health long term. Lastly, you may say, how old do I feel? What in the world would my attitude have to do with cognitive health? People who tell us that they feel younger than they actually are tend to be those who are more active physically and, importantly, more active socially. People who say, I feel years older than I actually am, are usually leading a more sedentary lifestyle and tend to be a little more isolated than people who say, no, I actually am, I feel younger than I actually am. So how old do you feel actually does impact your cognitive health. I want to spend just a couple of seconds on myths that we often hear that are tied to cognitive health. One is someone who says, well, you know, dementia, that's just a part of normal aging. There's nothing I can do. First of all, understand that when we talk about dementia, dementia is a broad category. It can be caused by many different things. You may be suffering from vascular dementia, where your brain is not getting proper blood supply and oxygen supply. It may be Lewy body dementia. It may be dementia associated with Parkinson's disease. So dementia is a big category. Alzheimer's disease and these other conditions I just mentioned are just specific types of dementia, but none of them are a normal part of aging. Dementia is a cognitive disease. It's a brain disease. And as I mentioned to you earlier, they are not a normal part of aging. And what we're finding out now is the earlier we can detect them, the better medicine may be able to intervene to slow the progress or progression of the disease, or maybe even through some of these lifestyle factors we'll discuss, maybe be able to push it off indefinitely. But the second one is the one that I hear most often, which is, John, you don't understand. As I mentioned earlier, my grandmother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. People will say, my grandparents, my parents, my mom, my dad, they've had it. I'm going to get it. It's kind of fate. Well, what Dr. Milstein tells us is that only 1 to 5% of dementias are genetically determined. When I say genetically determined, I mean, if you have the gene, you're likely to develop the disease. And in those 1 to 5%, that 1 to 5% is primarily in the area of early onset Alzheimer's disease. Sadly, if you've inherited the gene for early onset Alzheimer's, there's a high probability that you will develop that disease. But what about the other 95 to 99% then of the diseases that are not genetically determined? Remember, I told you some of those superagers have the same genetic markers, yet they display long-term cognitive health versus others who don't. This is where research now says, and Dr. Milstein points out, that these lifestyle factors may play as important a role as genetics. Surely genetics are still a factor. Don't mishear me on that. However, they are not necessarily determinative. So let me just talk a little bit about brain health and why the brain does tend to age. As I mentioned already, the brain does begin to lose about 5% of its body mass every 10 years after age 40. Largely, the reason why your brain will lose mass is because of the buildup of what we call brain trash. What is brain trash? Brain trash are the leftover chemical residues of reactions that are going on constantly in your brain. Broken proteins, dead brain cells, so on and so forth. And like any functioning organism, including our homes, if we don't take out the trash from time to time, the trash builds up and it begins to clog up the system. In fact, your brain is only about a 3-pound organ up here that sits on your neck, but it will generate about 5 pounds of brain trash each and every year. And the more built up the trash, the older the brain. The good news, folks, is that all of us have a brilliantly designed body that is equipped to take out the trash on a daily, or should I say, nightly basis. Why and how is trash cleaned out of your brain? Much of the process occurs when you're asleep at night. Now, for those of you who may have studied sleep cycles before, you may know there's basically 4 different phases of sleep. The first 2 phases are comprised of what is kind of aggregated together as light sleep. In these phases, your body is cooling down, your pulse rate is slowing, also that you can enter a phase of sleep called deep sleep. When you enter deep sleep, your brain will actually shrink 30 to 40% in size. And when the brain shrinks, it will squeeze out the toxins and the waste that were beginning to accumulate in your brain during the day. At this same stage of deep sleep, you will have fluids that come up from your spinal cord to wash over the brain, to take that waste into the body's waste systems and away from the body. So one of the things you'll gather here is being able to get into deep sleep is really, really important. During deep sleep, your immune system is strengthened. Your tissues are healing, your bones are healing, and also this brainwash, if you will, it's called the glycemic system, is put into play to wash the trash out of your brain. Now, you will pass into a 4th phase of sleep that many of us are familiar with called REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. It's during that phase when you'll actually dream. And what's interesting about the REM sleep phase, it's not that much different than being awake. Remember I said in deep sleep, your body is cool, your pulse rate is slow. It will begin to accelerate when you enter REM sleep. And being in REM sleep is not that much different than being awake except that your brain is paralyzed, your arms and your legs, so you can't act out on what's going on. If you've ever woken in the night kind of perspiring, you probably woke up in the midst of a dream or in the midst of REM sleep. But for the purposes of brain maintenance, deep sleep is really the one that we're concerned with. That's where the brain shrinks, squeezes out the toxins, fluids come out to wash out the brain trash, take them into the body's systems. But if we're not functioning efficiently, some of this brain trash begins to build. If you've ever studied Alzheimer's disease and research into the drugs that have been targeting that disease, again, not for cure, but for slowing the progression, most of them, most of those pharmaceuticals are targeted at reducing what are called plaques in the brain. Plaques are built up brain trash that forms between the brain cells that interferes with the brain cells' abilities to communicate with themselves. So you may have heard of something called beta amyloid plaque. Beta amyloid plaque is one that is a part of Alzheimer's disease. I have to caution you here. The jury is still out. Do these plaques cause Alzheimer's disease, or are they a byproduct of Alzheimer's disease? Is one of those questions that researchers are still looking at. The other kind of trash that is very prevalent are called these neurofibrillary tangles. Tangles happen within the cells. Kind of the proteins that are in the cells get misguided, mistracked, and it actually can lead to the death of these brain cells. And so these are the type of trash, what we observe. We can't say for sure, again, that they are the key to curing Alzheimer's disease. However, it is apparent that where this brain trash builds, oftentimes so does cognitive decline. So anything we can do to promote the brain's cleansing of itself is something that we want to take part in. So I do want to take just a moment, kind of change the topic. I did my best job I could there with physiology, and let's talk about really the money part of it. Now I'm gonna tell you right up front, when a loved one is diagnosed with dementia, money is not the first thing that comes to mind. However, we will be managing it, and we may be managing it for a long time. Because, for example, in the case of Alzheimer's disease, the typical rate of survival is typically from 4 to 8 years. I've seen somewhere around 7 years after diagnosis. But many live as long as 20 years after diagnosis. And during that time, you'll be managing different types of medications. The needs for care may change, 24/7 care in some cases, and therefore that may lead to a change in the need for different types of housing or accommodation. To share with you kind of where the costs are in today's standards, the cost of a home health care aid is about $62,000 a year. These will change, by the way, geographic. Cost of assisted living, somewhere around $54,000 a year, and cost of a nursing home, just shy of $109,000 a year. But that's not if you need memory care. If you need memory care on top of these basic services, you can add another $12,000 to $48,000 in terms of the cost. So I think you'll agree, anything that we can do, that we have agency in, to either delay or avoid the onset of these diseases, is not only good from a quality of life standpoint, but also from a financial standpoint, because you may or may not realize Medicare does not pay for long-term nursing home stays. This long-term care is typically afforded either through insurance of some type or through funding it, self-funding, if you will, from your personal wealth assets. You can try to go the Medicaid route, but I would not recommend it. In every state, you have to essentially prove yourself penniless. That may be in terms of total assets. It may be in terms of a given income. And before you think, I got a good idea, let's give all the money to the kids. That way it'll look like they all have the money and we have nothing. There are complex clawback rules that bring those gifts back into your qualification numbers for Medicaid. Generally, as I said, not necessarily a path that you want to pursue. So you're really looking at either insuring or self-funding. And to give you kind of the moral of the story, the estimate as of 2023 is that for someone who's diagnosed with dementia, there will be lifetime care costs of just under $400,000. I would say I think that number is light. It may not take into account productivity loss of your caregiver, if that's an adult child, so on and so forth. The fact that they may have to step out of or away from the job for a while in order to manage care is something that we definitely need to include there as well. But as far as the stats go, just shy of $400,000. So again, just to kind of give us an awareness of why this is so important, both quality and financially to so many of us in terms of the life we wish to lead tomorrow. Because no matter who we are, when we look forward to what the future years have, it may be traveling, it may be volunteering, it may be hobbies or working or socializing, maintaining a good friendship network. Whatever it is, our brain has to go along with us, or certainly we're not going to be able to enjoy these benefits as we hope to. Okay, so folks, I want to bring us to the meat of the batting order. I want to share with you 5 lifestyle areas where research is now showing that we can make a difference. If we pay attention to some of the things we're doing and some of the ways we're living, we can promote better cognitive health. And you may have guessed the first area. The first area is sleep. Sleep, as we described the physical processes, one of the best defenses against cognitive decline. But you may say, John, you don't understand. I wake up every night, at least once a night. Well, folks, I've got good news for you. You wake up 4 to 6 times a night, every night. It's just that many times we may not realize that we're awake in between those sleep cycles. Remember, I talked about the cycles, light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep. Those cycles will occur in 90 to 110-minute repeating cycles throughout the night. This is why it's necessary that most adults get 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night, because that allows our brains to go through these 4 to 6 cycles where we'll squeeze out the toxins, we'll rinse them out into the waste systems, in addition to all the other things going on in our body in terms of immune system strengthening, tissue repair, so on and so forth. So 7 to 9 hours a night, 4 to 6 of those repeating cycles that we get to go through in order to maintain cleanliness in the brain. So I'm not going to leave you off there just by explaining it. I want to give you a few tips. Your first tip is make sure you're sleeping in true darkness. When you say, John, of course I'm sleeping in true darkness, it's nighttime. Folks, we've never had as much artificial light in our sleep environments as we currently have. Led, hopefully not, by this that is sitting right by your bedstand, so that when you wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning and you say, I wonder what time it is, and you hit that, not only does the light kind of distract you, but you see, oh, look at that, I got a text from someone, or I got a phone call that I missed. It's 4 a.m., right? It's not the time to start opening the books on the next day's activities, but that distraction can disrupt our sleep cycles. But also thinking about not just the phone, other sources of light in the room. If any of you remember a tennis pro by the name of Pete Sampras, Pete Sampras used to travel the globe with a roll of black duct tape in his bag. When he checked into a hotel room, the first thing he would do is tape shut the drapes and tape the drapes to the wall. He would put a piece of tape over the digital alarm clock if he wasn't able to reach the plug to unplug it. Minimizing the source of artificial light in his room, he said, allowed him to focus and concentrate better the next day. So evaluate your sleep environment, and to the extent that you can, make sure you're sleeping in true darkness, because your eyes can take in light even when your lids are closed. Don't believe me? If any of you have ever traveled on a nighttime cross-country flight, the red eye as they're called, I don't know about you, but I always happen to be sitting next to the guy in the middle seat that needs to read all the way home. I can guarantee you light does come in even when your eyes are closed. A sleep mask is now part of my travel equipment. So looking at the sleep environment, try to maintain true darkness. The second tip, 3 researchers won the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2017 for the discovery of the natural human circadian clock that all of us have. One of the best things you can do for your sleep at night is get outside in natural light within the first 10 minutes of waking in the morning. So within the first 30 minutes, if you can get outside for about 10 minutes within the first 30 minutes of waking up, being in natural light will reset that circadian clock so that it will tell your body at night what time it is to start winding down. So whether you walk the dog, have your cup of coffee, walk to the mailbox, whatever it is, trying to get outside, but also think what happens when you get outside first thing in the morning. This morning, you might have walked out and said, wow, it's really cold. How did you know it's really cold? Because your skin and the nerves connected with your brain to say, it's cold out here, increase blood supply. right? Also, what did you see? What did you hear? What did you smell? Anything sensory related is cognitively stimulant, and you get your brain kind of kickstarted into the day. So try to get some natural light early. And the last tip, I don't mean to cause marital problems or relationship problems between you and a significant other, but it is a good idea to lower the temperature in the sleep environment by just a few degrees over which you would exist during the day. Why is that? Remember, I said during light sleep, your body's trying to cool down so it can transition into deep sleep? By keeping the environment cooler, your body doesn't have to work as hard to cool itself down. You can transition more easily into that phase of deep sleep where a lot of that repair goes on. I do get asked questions about napping. I'm a big fan of naps, where you can find one. But here's a couple of tips on napping. A, they do count towards your 7 to 9 hours of sleep. But do not take a nap at 9 p.m. and wonder why you can't fall back asleep at 10:30, right? Make sure you space your naps where they won't interfere with your natural sleep cycle. And when you nap, try to keep your naps to 20 to 30 minutes. I know some of you are saying, what good is that? Have you ever woken up from the nap? I think we've all done it. And you kind of wake up, and when you start to walk around, you don't know what planet you're on. You don't know what week it is or what you were doing before you laid down. It's probably because you woke in one of the phases of deeper sleep, either deep sleep or REM sleep, and it's disorienting. You don't want to wake up in those phases and disrupt the processes that are going there if you can help it. So keep your wake up times into the light sleep kind of phases, which usually occur in the first 20 to 30 minutes of laying down. So try to keep the naps to 20 to 30 minutes and keep them so they're not disruptive to your sleep cycle. So sleep, and a couple of tips on sleep, very important. Second area is you are what you eat, the gut brain connection. You may not realize it, but you have almost as many brain cells in your gut as you do in your brain. And the gut and the brain are very connected. One of the things that we know, and I'll keep this simple, is that there is a diet out there now called the MIND diet, MIND, very similar to the Mediterranean diet. When it comes to cognitive health, you want to keep your diet to lean proteins and fresh whole foods, extra virgin olive oil, fruits and vegetables, much like the Mediterranean diet that has been very popular. Nuts, be careful of the nuts, high in caloric value, but healthy fats. And then beans, again, beans, good source of protein. These are good foods, but the key is fresh whole foods. Let me give you an example of a food not to eat. I think it's still there. It was the last time I was there. There was a museum in Chicago called the Museum of Industry and Science. And if you were to go into that museum, behind a double pane glass case, they have a Hostess Twinkie that was unwrapped like 10 years ago. It looks as fresh and delicious as if it were unwrapped 30 seconds ago. Those are not the kind of foods you want to eat. You want food that is going to spoil if you leave it in the counter, that's going to stink if you leave it in the refrigerator too long, because that fresh and natural process is really key. Really, what the key is in nutrition is you're trying to eat foods that minimize inflammation in the body. Inflammation is a key, yes, in our joints, but it's also a problem in our brains. You see, the immune system oftentimes reacts to inflammation by sending out immune attack cells to try to find the source of the inflammation and kill it. The problem is these attack cells don't always know the difference between the bad guys and the good guys, and they can kill healthy cells. Some of you may have heard of things called autoimmune diseases like lupus or rheumatoid arthritis. These are actually diseases where the body's own immune system is attacking the body itself, and it's kind of an unbalanced immune system. Well, when it comes to the foods that we eat, some foods can cause inflammation. The more we can reduce inflammation, the less a chance that our immune systems attack the wrong cells. And just like it can happen in our joints, it can also happen in tissues, and more specifically, brain tissue. So eating foods that lessen inflammation, that lower the risk of an improper immune response, can help us maintain cognitive health for longer. How about stress? If I were to ask you all, is stress a good thing or a bad thing for cognitive health? I've got a surprise. A little bit of stress is not a bad thing, because when you're stressed, what's the first thing you have to do? You have to think, right? So if we were all together, I hope this doesn't happen to anyone today, but here's an example I'll often use. Let's say later this afternoon, you jump into your car, you're going to run down to the grocery store or something. All of a sudden, boom, there's a blowout in your tire. What's the first thing you'll do? And I had one woman stand up a couple of weeks ago and say, swear. And I said, no, you have to think of the swear word you're going to use. And she said, oh, no, that comes naturally. Well, okay. However, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to think, right? Where can I pull over safely? Did I pay that AAA premium? Where's the jack and how does it work? Who am I going to call? How am I going to get out of this? What did I do the last time I was here? See, that thought process is the brain functioning. That's not such a bad thing. However, our brains were not built for the amount of stress that we're now surrounded by. And I probably don't have to point out to you, believe it or not, this is an election year. And if you think you're stressed now, wait till we get to September, October, November. So we need to think about ways to manage this stress. I have a couple of ideas for you. First one's called breathing exercises. Now, the first time I heard about this, I'm thinking I'm going to be sitting on a mountaintop somewhere, arms crossed, saying my mantra. No, it's not like that. In fact, we can all participate in right here on our webinar today. When I say go, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a deep breath through your nose, breathe in for about 5 seconds, nice long deep breath. And I want you to think about breathing in relaxation. We're going to hold it for a second, and then we're going to breathe out through your mouth for a 5-second exhale. Think about breathing out anxiety. So you ready? Go. 5-second inhale through your nose. Hold it. 5-second exhale. Can you feel your body relax? Because what you'll find is that your pulse rate will begin to slow. The other thing that it does, whatever you were just thinking about, it gives your brain a break. It gives a break between the part of your brain that wants to respond to something and the part of your brain that wants to reflect and add perspective. Remember I said that some of you say, John, I wake up during the night and all of a sudden I start rifling through my calendar. One of the things you might try is a brief breathing exercise in the middle of the night. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Tell yourself this is not the highest and best use of my time at 3 a.m. The second method, changing your perspective. I'm a big fan of Dr. Stephen Covey. Dr. Covey tells a nice story in the beginning of his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He talks about getting on a subway train where the young man comes in with a couple of kids. Within a few minutes, the kids are all over the place like animals. They're bumping into everybody. They're loud. Finally, Dr. Covey says to the man riding in the train, sir, would you mind controlling your children? They're bothering everyone. And the man looks at him and says, oh, I'm sorry. We're coming from the hospital where they lost their mother a few hours ago. And I guess I'm not sure kind of where we're at, what the situation is. Covey called it an aha moment. We may not have all the information. When that person cuts you off in traffic, yes, your first response is, I want to get out and yell at him or do whatever. But given some perspective, you may say, well, I don't know, could have been a medical emergency. And did it really matter because we're now at the red light and he's exactly one car in front of me, right? Changing your perspective can help manage stress. And lastly, a little exercise we call rose, thorn, bud. When you're stressed, I want you to think about the best thing that happened to you in the last 24 hours. I then want you to think about the worst thing that happened in the last 24 hours, because chances are it's not the thing that you're worried about right now. And then importantly, I also want you to think about the thing you're most looking forward to in the next 24 hours. Rose was the best thing in the last day, thorn the worst thing in the last day, bud the thing I'm most looking forward to. When you allow your brain time to think, you reduce stress levels, because that's when you begin applying rational thought. You start applying perspective. You'll bring back memories, what happened the last time this happened, as opposed to your first reactions, which are fight or flight. Cortisol's flowing, heart rate's increasing. Give your brain a chance to relax. So breathing exercises, changing perspective, and that little exercise called rose, thorn, bud. Speaking of exercises, as I mentioned earlier, walking, great exercise. But if there was one prescription I could give you, aside from better sleep habits to combat cognitive issues later in life, it's to get moving. Exercise creates a healthy brain environment. As I mentioned already with the circular flow and oxygen consumption. A healthy body supplies healthy amounts of oxygen to the brain and promotes brain communication. We made up a little acronym here to help you think about exercise. By the way, I don't care what kind of exercise. In fact, one of the best exercises for cognitive health, dancing. Think about it. Dancing, you use every muscle in your body, the nerves. You also have to remember the dance steps. And if you're dancing with a partner, you kind of have to read what they're doing in order to react to it. So whether it's dancing, pickleball, running, whatever it is, it's all good, walking. But a couple of ideas for you in the acronym CARS. One is set yourself up visual reminders. If you've studied anything related to habit formation, visual reminders are very important cues for continuing an exercise habit. If you're going to walk in the morning, make sure you lay your tennis shoes in front of the door. If you're going to go to the gym, make sure you get your gym clothes out the night before. Remove any obstacle and set a visual reminder that says, that's right, this is what I'm to be doing right now. Action, think through your day and think about how you might incorporate more physical movement. Park a little further from the grocery store, maybe take a flight of steps, try something new. The last two, I think, are kind of givens, right? It's do something you enjoy with someone that you like doing it with. I would just say take the negative. If you do something you hate with people you don't like, you're most likely not going to stick with it. So again, cues, action, reward yourself by doing something you like and make it social. Do it with someone you enjoy doing it with, which leads us to our last lifestyle area, cross-training your brain. When we learn new things, it keeps the brain young. What happens when we learn new things is that there's a process that goes on in your brain called myelination. The brain cells are coated with a substance called myelin, which makes it easier for the brain cells to communicate. One of the things about those superagers, they tend to show a great interest in challenging themselves in terms of their mental game. And when I put this up, people are like, that's great, because John, I love to do crosswords. Well, guess what, folks? I love to do crosswords as well. But if all you do are crosswords, you know what you're going to get good at? Doing more crosswords. No, mix it up from time to time, right? That's what we mean by cross-training. When you try something new, oftentimes you'll find it's frustrating. For example, you see the guy in our slide playing a guitar. Dr. Milstein would say, if you picked up a guitar, don't start to play one song and play it until you can play it like Eric Clapton. Play one song for a week or two, and then what? Learn a new song. It won't feel right. Your hands won't feel right. It won't sound right. It's kind of frustrating. You get the frustration that you're feeling is your brain building new neural pathways, making new connections about how to do something new. Embracing that feeling is really, really important. So learning something new. I would say you can split this three ways. Learn to do something new physically, learn something new mentally, that book you were going to read, a topic you're interested in, studying history, reading about the development of some new facet of something you're interested in. Really important, but folks, the one that's most often overlooked and crucial is meeting new people. Staying social as we age is incredibly important to brain health. When you meet somebody new, not only do you have to learn their name, you have to learn a little bit about them, what you have in common, so on and so forth. So socialization, I can tell you beyond just cognitive health, the importance of your friends to healthy and long life is something that we've studied at MIT for quite a long time. It also has been corroborated by studies at Harvard and Yale universities as well. Your friends are critically important to aging well. And sometimes as we age, our friend groups are going to naturally kind of fade away. They'll either move away, pass away, or they will get lesser in strength. It's important that we incorporate new people into our social networks as we age in order to learn something new. So folks, one last comment, and that's about supplements. Oftentimes after an in-person presentation, somebody will come up to me and say, John, I hear what you're saying, and I ordered this new supplement for my favorite cable news TV channel. It's made from crushed up seashells or something. But since I've been taking it, it's changed my life. Memory, recall, ability to focus, been great. And I'll say, that's wonderful. What's the supplement? And they say, I can't remember. Just a little clue there, folks. In some cases, the marketing has made it ahead of the medicine. As far as Dr. Milstein is concerned, no long-term studies yet on the value of supplementing for cognitive health. Maybe in the future, some things will emerge, but be careful with supplements. They're unregulated. And even if you're supplementing with over-the-counter medications, you should inform your primary care physician of what you're supplementing. So, folks, we talked about your age versus your brain's age. We talked about the importance of brain health, a little physiology, and a little bit of financials. And then these 5 areas: sleep, nutrition, exercise, stress, learning new things. I'll end with a quote from Dr. Milstein, who says, a sharp mind into older age isn't just a bit of luck. It's within reach for most of us. And Bill, as I stop my sharing here, I'll add that we will make sure to get to you a white paper that was written by Dr. Milstein. It's a 4-page summary of what we talked about today, in case any of your listeners would be interested in getting a summary. And again, Dr. Milstein's book, The Age-Proof Brain, is a really good resource as well.
Yeah, John, that's great, and we'll be sure to send that out to our financial advisors who have clients and associates on this call, and then they can push that out to all the participants. By the way, folks, this webinar is being recorded. So once we get the recording, this will be sent out to you. If there's a friend, a family member, anyone that you think could be a good candidate to listen to this, certainly forward that on to them. As I mentioned at the very beginning of the webinar today, if you do have questions, please send those to cornerstonewm@lpl.com. Those will come to me. I'll try to compile those and then pass those questions on along to John. John, so my big takeaways from this are: I need to walk faster. Number 2, I definitely need to be more frequent in terms of taking my brain trash out. And unfortunately, the last one is no Twinkies. So I was a little upset about the no Twinkies part, but all great information. Really appreciate it. And while we're waiting for some questions to come in, I do have one for you, and it relates to the sleep. And you mentioned that people can take naps during the day, and that does count toward those 4 cycles, if you will. I know a lot of folks who happen to be very, very productive individuals, highly successful. Maybe they don't take naps, but they always seem to be the ones who are only sleeping 4 hours, 5 hours a night. They're up at 4 a.m. and often running at that standpoint. They might go to bed early, sometimes not, but it just seems like they can get more done on less sleep. Now, to be clear, I am not one of those people. I need my 7 to 8 hours. But that being said, any comments on, again, those folks that just have that ability to run on less sleep?
Yeah, this may surprise you, Bill, but it's actually a genetic trait. 1% of Americans are deemed to be short sleepers, meaning they don't need the 7 to 9 hours. If you're one of the 1%, it's likely that you had a parent or grandparent who is also a short sleeper and passed that gene on to you. So yes, that is very legitimate. That may very well be the case. And Bill, one other thing unrelated that I meant to touch on that slipped my mind. Funny, we're talking about retain your brain, it slipped my mind, but I do want to mention it. In that area of learning new things, one of the things that really surprised me in working with Dr. Milstein was the importance of hearing aids. Did you know that people who are suffering from mild hearing loss that goes untreated are twice as likely to develop dementia? People who are suffering from severe hearing loss that goes untreated, 5 times as likely to suffer eventually the development of dementia. The reason being, if we can't hear, it's hard to learn new things. And oftentimes we'll recognize this by a friend or a loved one who's at dinner with us suddenly doesn't seem to be participating as much as they used to, a little bit withdrawn. The next time we go out, they may say, why don't you all go and have a good time? I'm a little bit tired. I'm just going to hang behind. Hearing aids are more than just about being able to hear. They're also about cognitive health. So a strong recommendation, if someone's on the fence about, should I go get my hearing checked? Absolutely, please do it, because addressing those hearing issues can also be a way to fend off cognitive disease.
It's very interesting. My wife's grandfather, who was just a wonderful man, did have hearing aids. One of the things that we always joke about is when he would go into kind of a crowded room with the family, a lot of times you would see him reach up and turn them down so he could completely tune out, but he would turn them back on so, he could deal with
At
the
least you thought
thoughts.
he'd put it back on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that was maybe a coping mechanism just to not deal with conversations he didn't want to have. But it's good to hear that it can be treated, with the hearing aids. It's not that it's just a precursor or a sign that that memory loss is coming.
That's correct.
Well, John, we don't have any more questions. Really appreciate your time today and appreciate everyone's time who joined us. That was great information, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you all. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, John.